Hello and welcome to this episode. We had an amazing guest, Chana Studley. We spoke about trauma. We spoke about The Simpsons and blue skies. Come on, what a wonderful conversation that will be. But basically, we also spoke about how do we recover from trauma. And Hannah shared a really harrowing experiences that she had, not just once, not twice, but three times. So seriously, you need to come and listen. How do you recover from that? How do you recover from that type of trauma to accepting an Academy Award and helping clients through her counseling and trauma business that she has? So do come and listen to this beautiful, inspirational conversation that we had with Hannah Studley today.
But before we let you listen onto this wonderful conversation, I wanted to give you a little bit of a reminder that we are also on YouTube. So if you're listening on Spotify, if you're listening on podcast, make sure that you find us on YouTube where you can watch it as a video. And as a bonus, if you want to know a little bit more, sign up to our newsletter. We don't over spam you. We send it only every other week, but we digest some of the highlights, some of the key lessons from our wonderful guests and bring more value to you. So make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter as well. But let's go and let's tune in to the conversation we had with Hannah today. Hi, Hannah. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
So good. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have this conversation with you and learn a little bit more about your journey, your experiences, your wisdom, your accomplishments. So, could you tell us and our listeners a little bit more about you, who you are, what you do? Maybe give us a little bit of a teaser which direction this conversation today might end up going into?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Well, I grew up in England and I had a lot of horrible experiences in my early 20s. I was mugged three times. It's bad enough being mugged once, but three times was pretty severe. I had my skull fractured, my neck broken, three herniated discs on each of those occasions. And it was the early 1980s, so PTSD wasn't really recognized as a thing at the time. I was in Manchester, that's where I went to university. And basically the treatment I got was a cup of tea, walk it off, suck it up. That's how I was taught to deal with it. And consequently, I spent probably 3 years absolutely miserable, wasn't sleeping properly, wasn't eating properly. My period stopped, I was in a pretty bad physical way. And my mental state was getting worse and worse. And then I realized that maybe, I should get help. I went to the psychiatrist at the hospital. That didn't help at all. And then it happened again. I was mugged this time by three men who came out of the dark, slammed me on the ground, beat the living daylights out of me. I thought I was going to die. And so things got even worse. And then I decided Manchester was clearly the problem, so I should move to London. And I went down to London to start a career in the entertainment business. And I was mugged again, coming home from the theater one night. A young kid threw a bicycle at my head and fractured my two like vertebrae in my neck. And I luckily not my spinal cord, but it was pretty severe. And that time I went down pretty fast because, the third time I was terrified to leave the house after that. But to cut a long story short, I finally asked for help and recovered, and I went on to win an Academy Award in the film business. I started in the theater, then TV, movies, and ended up living in California for 16 years and working on really big Hollywood movies and flying around the world. So it was amazing because I went from not being able to get out of my bedroom, terrified to leave the house, to flying around the world working with most famous people in Hollywood. So I think really what I like sharing with people is that we're never broken. That everybody has innate well-being, everybody has innate resilience, and it was just a question of finding that and looking in the right direction. So that's what I like to talk about. Yeah.
Oh, wow. What a story. It's incredible to really start this powerfully to seeing the amount of, trauma and adversity you've had to overcome and being here smiling and happy and accomplished and really shining the light that even though we might talk about some difficult topics in this conversation, there is already the message of we can overcome anything and everything. We have the capacity. But let's talk a little bit practically in terms of if someone has trauma, it could be as severe as yours, it could be any kind of a loss and grief. We struggle with depression, there's lots of things happening in our lives, professionally, health-wise, family, career, that could leave us feeling of loss and desperation and negativity and feeling like we cannot leave the house, we cannot make a change, we cannot really do anything. We feel powerless. We feel like the world is against us. We feel afraid of, what could happen. So from your experience, what then were the first steps? Yes, you reached out and you seek professional help. Within that, what were the things that helped you start making the steps to recovery? Were there any specific advice, specific modalities, practices? What was the thing that started you to see the light and helped you then, get on the path of recovery?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say actually not professional help, because my family doctor sent me to the psychiatrist at the local hospital, and it was awful because it would take me 2 panic attacks just to get there. And then she would say to me, like, what happened? So the first time I tell her what happened, and then she's like, tell me again. I'm like, you deaf? Didn't you hear the first? Like, so I tell her again, and then she'd want me to tell her again. And I think I only went to 2 appointments because I couldn't, I needed her to help me not relive it and relive it, because that's what I was doing at home. And that's all she seemed she had to offer was to, like, I think they call it flooding therapy, where you keep like retelling the story as if you're going to then get bored of it. Well, I had been screaming it in my head for a couple of years, and that doesn't work. It didn't work for me anyway. So I then kind of went back into my shell and suffered for, a little while longer until when I was in London, I reached out to a women's crisis center. And I remember I had a mentor there, and she said to me, she asked me, was I willing to let go of my story? And I was like, what? I was so offended, like, because what I heard her say and what she actually said were two different things. What I heard her say was, it didn't happen, it didn't hurt, and get over it. Right? And in my head, I was screaming, it did happen, it still hurts, and I can't get over it. But thank God there was like this moment of clarity where I knew there was a grain of truth in what she was saying. And because I'd become the girl who was mugged 3 times, like it had become part of my identity. And a lot of the people I talk to with gone through traumas, and like you said, trauma is a very subjective thing. It doesn't have to be like massive violence like what I experienced. But I was feeling my thinking. That's what I see now, as I spent probably a good 10 years, what probably would now be called PTSD, 10 years up in my head, reliving, and because the events themselves, as terrifying as they were over in like seconds or a minute and a half at most. But the 10 years I suffered was happening in my head. And so that question kind of set me on the path of starting to learn and understand how the mind works, how thought is creating our experience from moment to moment. And we're actually having what I've learned to call an inside out experience, meaning I'm actually experiencing my thinking, not the circumstances. So fast forward, a couple of decades, and about 10 years ago, I came across a new understanding, a new paradigm in psychology, and I started learning that this idea that we're always feeling our thinking. And like I said at the beginning, we all have this innate well-being. So I can forget that. We can all get caught up in our thoughts. And when I do, I'm now suffering the memories or even the catastrophizing about the future. And if I come back to the moment, I'm actually safe. Here and right now, I'm okay. And that's what I share with people. That's what set me free. And it's so I don't go back into the past anymore. It's not that I can't, it's not that I'm afraid to. I just don't need to, because I've got what I need here and now.
It's such a powerful reframing. It's not taking away what have happened to you. It's not, really putting it aside and saying, you were not a victim of something horrible did not. We are not trying to hide that, but it's moving on from there. Again, the moving on is often difficult for people. PTSD is a very severe condition for lots of people, not only for people who have been in things like wars or any kind of an assault. PTSD can be really big part of our daily lives. Of we are, as you said, catastrophizing. We're living in our minds. We're often living either in the past and worrying about what have happened in the past and reliving, or living in the future in our minds of like, what if this happens? And I think the powerful message that you shared and lots of the insights that we get from our guests, it's the here and now, in the present, right now, right here. And that's where practices like mindfulness, could be embodied practices, could be physical activities, can really help us to bring our attention into the daily, into the reality right here. Is there something that, again, another practice or a technique that helped you then when you were starting noticing, okay, I have this realization, I know that present moment, right here, right now, I am safe. But again, our brains are powerful machines that do have a tendency to pull us into the direction of past or future. Were you practicing something? Were you using any techniques, any modalities, any tools that would help you find a balance again, find present moment again, to bring you back into this neutral, safe zone right here, right now?
The short answer is no. Because for many years, I trained as a trauma counselor and a certified life coach, and I had all these tools and techniques. And I find that tools and techniques are temporary. They work temporarily. And you have to keep doing. Like, I did tons of expressive writing. I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot, as Pilates, yoga, you name it. I tried it. Course in Miracles, the Enneagram, I tried everything. And another part of my story is that I had chronic pain for 25 years. My back would, I used to call it going out. My back would go out. I used to describe myself as being like Audrey Hepburn on one side and Marilyn Monroe on the other side. I'd be so twisted and contorted. I'd have sciatica pain shooting down my legs. I was paralyzed several times and rushed to the hospital. And I see now that pain, also IBS, asthma, allergies, you name it, I'd had it at some point. I see now that my body was screaming at me to slow down. Now, I kept trying to treat all those medical things because I saw them as, medical problems, hay fever, allergies, IBS, you need to go to all these different specialists. So I'm doing, meditation for my mind and chiropractic for my back, and it was exhausting. And it was actually when I stopped doing all those tools and techniques that the pain went away. I've been almost pain-free for 10 years now. And I started understanding what anxiety really is. Anxiety, at least for me, was I started to see that it was when I'm up in my head worrying, like you said, catastrophizing, going back to the past, whatever it is, all of the above, that any kind of tool and technique I was using to do that was actually continuing to rev up my nervous system, because it was like saying, there is something wrong, let's fix it, right? And so what I've noticed, especially about people with chronic pain, is we're often perfectionists. I don't know if anybody listening can hear them nodding right now, right? And what I realized about perfectionism, it's not so much about, getting everything in a row, like having your books, like color coordinated or something. That's kind of an OCD thing, which is a similar problem. But perfectionism, I found, is when you're seeing that something is wrong. We're supervising, monitoring, like I had this funny example a couple of years ago. I was walking through a parking lot. You know how they often paint white lines to show you where to park your car? And how sometimes there's always that idiot who parks like a little bit too close to the white line or across, and you're like, and I think I was in IKEA or somewhere like that, and I was walking through, and I saw someone who parked like that, and I remember thinking, it's so selfish. Why can't they just take a minute to just line up properly? And I started laughing because I don't even have a car right now. I live in the center of a city where there's nowhere to park. It's got nothing to do with me. And yet that's how my mind worked. And I think one of the symptoms of PTSD is hypervigilance. Like I was very hypervigilant about footsteps behind me, for example. I could be on this beach in California, beautiful sunshine with my friends, and somebody just jogs past me. My nervous system would jump. I mean, thank God that's been gone for a long time now, but that lasted for quite, say 10, 15 years after the muggings. So I think with all the tools and techniques I was using, all those different modalities, it's almost like the hypervigilance stopped out here, but it kind of went in here, and I got very vigilant about my thinking. I was excellent at thought hygiene, right? Can't have that negative thought, can't have that, like, write that one away, meditate that one away. And all of that was an innocent, I'm going to stress the word innocent. It was an innocent misunderstanding of how the mind works. What if thought is actually neutral and you don't have to do anything? Why? Because thought is a spiritual energy and it's always moving. It's constantly moving through our minds. So I like to talk in analogies with my clients. So I say, like, what if thought is like trains going in and out of a station? My head is like Grand Central Station. So this thought has gone through. The train has left the station. So any kind of reframing tool technique is like dragging the train back into the station to work out how to make it leave. Well, it already left, right? So once I started understanding that thought is an energy and it's always moving, there was actually nothing to do. And I think that's why my pain went away. That's why my anxiety went away. And like you said, I can talk about the past. I can talk about it in graphic detail now. Can't upset me now because I'm in a better mood, a better perspective. It's not denial. I just see it differently now. Now, if I were in a low mood right now telling you about it, I'd be crying, you're crying, it's a disaster, right? But from a better perspective, when I see how it actually works, I'm not frightened to talk about it because it's not happening now.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for, sharing this perspective, because I think you tapped on something that is very, very common right now, and it's the doing. We are really looking at health and well-being and recovery and personal development as doing. What can we do? What practice can we bring in? And it is overwhelming. Like, if we would take all the advice that's out there for health and well-being and longevity and recovery, we would spend all day, every day, just going from one practice to another for our mind, for our body, for our emotions, for our connections. And it is overwhelming. And we feel like we have to do these things. We listen to podcasts like these and we discover a new modality and we discover a new tool. We're like, this is going to save me, this is going to heal me. And now I have to dedicate time. And to a point, for some people, it definitely can help. All these modalities, they have their time and space, and yoga is wonderful and meditation is wonderful. But thank you so much for sharing this permission not to do anything, pretty much, like having this, almost like acknowledging the switch in our mind that we can be, don't want to say fixed, but heal and pain-free and living in a better energy, better place, simply by unlocking this understanding in our minds. And that's not to say that we cannot continue journaling and meditating and doing all these things, because they're wonderful, but not put so much pressure on us and on our modalities and our chosen things, because we're human beings, we're not human doings. So thank you so much, really appreciate. And this is such a strong message. I really hope everyone listening pays attention and listens truly what you just shared with us.
I just want to say I love that analogy that you use, the train station. It's just a visual, and thank you for that. That was really a beautiful, like you said, analogy to the thoughts have already gone. Don't drag the train back. Leave it on its journey. So that was really nice. My question is, you said you were in film, worked with some amazing people, but what got you started on your other path, on your other journey? Because you said the life coaching and I think it was the psychology. What got you from an Academy Award to life coaching? That's quite a step. What made you sort of decide to change careers, or was it a slow progression? Was it, we'd love to know, what was your journey to where you are now from, I'm going to use the Academy Award because I think that's an amazing achievement and well done, but that's going in one direction and you are in a totally different place now. So I'd love to know your journey from there to where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for asking that, because some of people are like, they seem like such different things. They kind of gone alongside each other, I think, for a long time. So I trained as a counselor when I was in college. I trained with Manchester Rape Crisis Centre in the early 80s. And it's kind of alarming to think today there were only 2 of those centres in the country at the time. There was one in London and one in Manchester in 1980. And they trained us to answer the hotline, to go and give talks to community centres, to talk to lawyers, doctors, social workers, people like that, policemen who would, like be attending women who were. In fact, I even went to Manchester Crown Court one time as an advocate with a woman. Can you imagine being in a courtroom with the man that had hurt her? It was, quite I needed to be there to support her. And so that was my background. And then, so in the entertainment business, I did special effects, or visual effects, I should say. And I got known, I'm sure you've heard of Kermit and Miss Piggy, the Muppets. So Jim Henson's Creature Shop, who I worked for in London, we used to do special effects for other people's movies. So the Muppets are done in New York, and we did in Camden, in London, we had a workshop. And so the first movie I did, it was the first Flintstones movie. So I went to California to film that, and then I came back, and then the one we got the Academy Award for was Babe, the talking pig movie, if anybody remembers that one. So we had to go to Australia to film that one. So I'm now starting to travel, and then that's why I ended up in California, because the movie business. But I became known for making copies of real animals. So if a movie had a talking animal in it, we would make a copy of exactly that animal, and it would cut from the real animal to my puppet, and you won't know the difference. And so people will say, like, there's no puppets in Babe. I'm like, does your dog talk? Right? Right. So thank you. That's a big compliment, because you suspended your disbelief for like an hour and a half and think these animals are talking to each other. Well, they can't. Like Harry Potter can't. Well, actually, Harry Potter can fly, but Daniel Radcliffe can't. So that's the kind of work I was doing all these special effects. So not every movie has special effects in it like that, especially talking animals. So I would have downtime, like a month or so off in between each movie. And that's when I would continue with, my coaching and counseling work. I would do like volunteer for different organizations, especially in California. There was like a recovery house on every street corner. I worked with the Boys and Girls Clubs, helping kids with homework and working with disadvantaged kids and addicts and alcoholics and all kinds of things. And so this was kind of going on for a long time. So my short, smart answer to this, how did I go from that to doing this full time, is that our minds have a better special effects department than anything me or Steven Spielberg could come up with, right? I mean, how many people listening have got up to like pee in the middle of the night and like seen a shadow or something, right? And scared yourself, right? Because we think it's something dangerous. You think it's a snake or a spider or a mouse or something, and it's actually a sock or a belt, and you're like, oh, thank God, right? So our minds can trick us all the time. And I think pain is like the ultimate special effect. My teacher is a psychiatrist. He started out as a surgeon in Vietnam and then became a psychiatrist. And so he taught me once, he said, or like flashbacks, those kind of things. He said, like, they're thoughts with special effects, right? So if you're trembling, if you're having hallucinations, depersonalization, like palpitations, dizziness, because when I say pain, it includes all those things. And I think now, like, even my back, even though I was like really bent out of shape at times and in a lot of pain, it used to feel like someone had hit me with a baseball bat. My pelvis felt like it had snapped in two. Like I said, my body was screaming at me. That was the special effect. And the illusion was that there was something wrong with my body. But now I've learned to interpret all those not just the physical things, but the emotional and mental things as well. Like when our thinking speeds up, like anxiety really is speeded up thinking, or, your heart rate starts to go up, or you start to feel a bit dizzy, or, all those things. I see them now as signals. There's so much wisdom. Like our bodies are full of wisdom. That's how they heal, like a cut or a fracture. But our minds are built with wisdom too. And what I've learned is if you leave it alone, it will settle like a snow globe, right? If I keep trying to fix and change and run around like a headless chicken, it's like shaking up the snow globe all the time. But how does a snow globe lentle? Leave it alone. And so our minds are actually built with incredible wisdom to heal as well. And I think, like Lenka was saying, like about not doing anything. For some people, some of us, that's the hardest thing to do, is just to settle and be still. And yes, meditation, writing, they're wonderful things. But what I started realizing, if you go a little bit further upstream, you can actually settle if you understand how it works. And then I don't have to spend hours and hours a day, trying to fix myself and trying to do these things perfectly in order to get somewhere. And that's what I learned, is like I was always trying to get somewhere, like my well-being was over there. When I realized it, I already had it. It's inside. There was nowhere to get to. That's why I didn't really need to do much anymore. And consequently, not just my physical health got better, but my relationships got better. My business got better. I've started writing books. I mean, I've written like 3 or 4 novels now. Where did that come from? It's like, as my thinking settled, the creativity started to blossom. The peace came, and I not from working on it, because that's who we really are. We are the blue sky.
That is really beautiful. But just for our guests, or sorry, our listeners, just for clarity, when you say settle, can you maybe describe a little bit, or your experience of it? Because is it settling by sitting still in a corner and just trying to keep the mind quiet, or is that now another modality? Can you go in a little bit into what do you mean by settling? Because obviously the word settle is different for different people. So if you can just dig deeper into that. And as you said, especially for those who are always wanting to be over there and the mind is rushing, how can they find that settled?
Yeah. I think the best way is to call it awareness. And awareness has a feeling to it. Because often my clients will say, well, which thoughts should I listen to? Or should I do this? Should I do that? And I always direct them back to, how does it feel? Because if it feels heavy, urgent, intense, that's a clue. That's a clue that it probably isn't a good idea, right? Especially for me, it was the urgency one. Like, gotta send that email right now. Gotta be like, if I don't tell them, they're gonna do it wrong. They're gonna get away with it. That kind of stuff. And so being able to identify things like urgency, heaviness, intensity, they're all things that kind of alert my attention. So the analogy I would use for this is, say you were in the kitchen and you touched something hot. You wouldn't think, what was that podcast I was listening to the other day? What told you how to get your hand out of a fire? What? I'm sure Hannah said something. No, Natalie said so. No, you would automatically take your hand. You don't need a podcast to tell you to take your hand out, right? But I needed someone to teach me that the things like urgency and intensity were the signals to tell me to stop listening to that thinking. I didn't know that you could not listen to thinking. Though if a thought came into my head, it must be true, real, needs to be analyzed, needs to be Googled, needs to, like, a lot of my clients are Googling at 3 o'clock in the morning and making themselves crazy. What if you could catch yourself? So I started becoming aware. Now, at first, it was the really glaring things, like if my back is screaming at me and I'm bent sideways and I can't sit down, I can't stand up. That's a kind of very loud alarm, I've realized now, or the IBS, or, dizziness, migraines, insomnia, all that kind of stuff are kind of like, they're like a fire engine, screaming at you. Then I started, as it got to understand this more, I got to notice more subtle signals. So I think of it like a lift going up and down. Imagine a lift in a department store. So let's say the basement, which is dirty and full of rubbish and broken mannequins and a mouse, that's the loud alarms. As you go up the escalator, it gets a bit more subtle. And I started noticing that in the middle, for me, it's things like blaming other people. That was a good one. I'm very judgmental. Right? It's their fault. They started it. If they would just change, if they would just, do that, get their work done on time, if they just then I'd be okay. Right. So the judgment and the blame were kind of like, a little step up from that. And then if I go further and further up, I started noticing that my first kinds of signals that I've noticed now, after doing this for a few years, are things like losing my sense of humor, getting a little bit serious. Because if I get a little bit, because when I know that when I'm in a really good mood, I can be goofy and I can fool around and joke and you can make fun of me, I don't care, like I'm up on the roof, that's fine, don't worry about it, right? But as I start going down in my, whether you call it levels of consciousness or state of mind, mood, they all mean the same thing. as I'm going down, there's certain little red flags start showing up. So I start to lose my sense of humor. Everything's getting a bit serious. Don't you dare make a joke out of this because it's a big problem, right? And then impatience, intolerance, you know, blaming other people, judgment. And then if I miss those things, that for me, that's when the physical stuff starts showing up to like really get my attention. And so now, if I get a little twinge of pain in my back or my stomach gets a little bit upset, I know what it is. I like, oh my gosh, yeah, I had some hurt feelings yesterday, or I had some guilt about, or I had some, you know, disappointment or betrayal, whatever it is. And I might have missed it. And so my back doesn't have to go into a full-on, you know, lying on the yoga mat for 3 days screaming at the chiropractor anymore, because I've learned that means something, I'm a little bit off, not to judge myself for it, because we're all human. And then you can go back up again. And I found that just that awareness can pop you out of it like that. Now, I'll be honest, I've only been popped out of it literally from almost in tears to laughing a couple of times, because I'm human, and I'm like still like, yeah, but they started it, or if that was different. So what I hang on to is I know it's going to pass, whatever it is, whether it's pain, a deadline, you know, like a presentation you got to do, it's going to pass, right? Even if you lose your keys and you lock yourself out of your car, you could eventually, AAA is going to come and you're going to get back in your car, right? Whatever it is, you're going to find your wallet, you're going to get rid, you know, call the bank and the credit card. Everything passes. So even if I'm still stuck in a bit of the drama, I can hang on to my seat. I know it's going to pass. And then you breathe more slowly and you come back to the moment, and sometimes, you know, that can happen like that when I really see how ridiculous I got caught up in something. Sometimes it's more slowly. Sometimes I know, you know, in a couple of hours, and then you look around and it's gone. You're like, wow. Right? So it's kind of awareness, I think, would be the simplest way to say it.
And awareness is so powerful. And it's obviously, it takes time and practice, and not judging yourself and blaming yourself, but just slowly getting into it, because you know, you don't go from that, you know, busy to that awareness and everything sorted. It takes time and practice, but as you said, it is awareness. Awareness is really powerful. And as you were speaking, it was just reminded me of one of our guests that we had, who spoke, he came on and he spoke about the mind. When you are talking, it's just reminding me of what he said is, we think we are our minds, but our minds are a separate entity to who we are. And I just wanted to bring that in, because I think that is also really powerful, is we are not our minds, but yet we listen to our minds and we make out like our minds are us, the main thing, the all and the most powerful, and yet it isn't. It is separate, and we can, with time and work, shift the way our mind is, because we are not our minds. And part of that is the awareness. And just when you were speaking about, you know, just realizing your different levels on your lift, and just the learning to know when your mind is going off, and when to just get back that sense of humor and go back up to the roof, and not down into the basement. And that just shows that we are not our minds, and that we can shift it. And I appreciate it's not something that happens overnight. You know, I can't just decide, okay, I'm going to be aware now. That's it. Life's hunky-dory. Woo!
Well, it can. That's the amazing thing. Like you're so right about the mind, because it never occurred to me that I'm not my thinking. And that I think that is huge for a lot of people, when you suddenly start seeing that you are not your thinking. Like, we have no control over the thoughts that come into our heads. Random nonsense comes into anybody's heads, you know. What I do with it is up to me. I have free will what to do with that. But I think what I found to be more powerful than the tools and techniques is insight. Insight, a sight from within. That's what can shift thinking really fast. And like the example I often give my clients is, like, I remember when I went to college, and I remember I had a girlfriend who lived in the dorms, and we went over to her place, and one of her roommates was eating cornflakes for dinner. And I remember thinking, you can't do that. That's not allowed, right? The funny thing was, I was a punk rocker with, I don't know, dreadlocks or spiky hair at the time, in the early 1980s. But I come from a very conservative house where my mother, breakfast cereals for breakfast, and then you put it away, and then, and it's amazing how fast the brain can work, because in a split second, I looked at her and said, that's wrong. You can't do that. See, it's my perfectionist coming out, right? And then thinking, hold on a minute, there are no breakfast cereal police. My mom was the one who would be upset with that, because if you're eating cornflakes for dinner, that means you're lazy, because you didn't go shopping, you didn't cook something, and that's wrong. And then I started thought, oh my gosh. And then I started laughing, because I realized you can eat cornflakes for dinner. How cool, right? So I had a shift in my thinking, and that's about something very silly, but my thinking shifted within a split second, and on that topic, everything looked different, right? So it can happen very quickly. Like I said about pulling your hand out of the fire, it's very rare that people have this as a genetic condition where people don't feel pain. And to anybody who's in pain right now, that might sound like luxury, but people who can't feel pain don't last very long, because they can get a cut or an infection and they don't feel it, and then they don't get treatment, and they get sick and die. So all of these things are wisdom trying to help us, whether it's survive or just enjoy, or have a better view of things. So I'll give you a practical one about myself. I remember it was just after COVID, and like none of us had been anywhere for a long time. And I remember when the airports first started opening, there was, the airports were packed, right? And I had to go to London to speak at a conference. It's a 5-hour flight from where I am. And so I was really excited about going. You go to do a presentation, to see some old friends. And the night before the flight, I tripped and fell, and I cracked a rib. Now, I didn't go to the hospital because I know there's nothing they can do for a cracked rib, but it really hurt, and it's hard to take deep breaths, which when you're lugging luggage across Europe, that's a little tricky. Right? Now, it was a 3-day conference, and the first day of the conference was my birthday. And I dropped a hint to a few people it was my birthday. Nobody remembered, right? So I've got a broken rib. I can't breathe very well. I'm in pain. Nobody remembers my birthday. I couldn't go shopping. I couldn't do all the touristy things I wanted to do. It was a miserable trip, and I'd been looking forward to it for ages. I got home. I'm sitting here, and it was June, right? So I'm looking out my window, and it's like blue sky, sunshine. I'm home and I'm safe. And I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's a cartoon of a man sitting on a park bench, and rain is only falling on him and everybody else is in the sunshine. That's what I suddenly had, this awareness that I was sitting in the feeling of last week's misery. But right now, I'm home safe and it's sunshine and I'm actually okay. And I went from being really miserable to laughing in seconds, right? That's the power of insight. Now, like I said, it hasn't happened like that click that often, because I'm not always at that place where I'm willing to let go of, like, what, they didn't remember my birthday, right? As long as I'm stuck on the drama, I'm going to still be in that thinking. So what we're really looking for is zooming out, as it were, zooming out, and just when you can see it's just a thought. It's like there's actually no difference between what's for dinner, those men almost killed me, and what's on TV tonight. There are thoughts going through my mind. It depends on the meaning I make out of it that's actually creating the experience. Now, I'm not saying that we should never be upset, or, I can get hurt feelings. I can get disappointed. It's not about being a robot. But I've learned I don't have to be frightened of those feelings. And then they come and they go, and I'm not a victim of them anymore.
They do not stop you from living, and they do not keep you locked in this fearful, afraid, scared, pain zone. And again, it's such an empowering message that you're sharing, that we all have the power within, and we don't need to spend days and weeks and months and years in therapy, going to sessions. And again, not to say that, professional help and any kind of support that people feel they may need, or medication, it's not helpful. Of course it is. But so often we do spend so much time off our living and feeling happy and fulfilled and, enjoying life on these things of doing the improvements. And again, it goes back to how we set our mind to the beliefs. Like if we believe that healing takes time, that healing takes work, that getting better requires effort, then that's what we're going to do. And that's where we're always going to end up being stuck. But if what we take from today's conversation is the fact that it can happen like this, or it can be fast and efficient and in the moment, and we have all the powers within, we can do it for ourselves, then that is a whole new world opening for so many of us, so many of our listeners, and people seeking help and seeking advice, or even maybe not seeking anything because they believe it's not possible for them, because they've already been through so many modalities, so many experts and professionals, spent so much time and money and effort, and kind of seen some improvements possibly, but still feeling like it's not enough and it's not happening for them. It's not in the cards for them. They're the exception that this approach, this modality, this intervention does not work. So, how about if there's some people like this out there that have been there, done that, and they're really stuck in their mind or in believing that I'm one of those people who will always be suffering. I'm one of those people who I'm the exception to all the rules. None of the modalities, none of the approaches will work for me. They're stubborn in their approach, and maybe they have had a lot of trauma and lots of things not going their way. What would be your advice to them?
Well, the first thing is seeing that that's just a thought. And in fact, I've learned that there are no exceptions to that. And I know some things can seem more real or have deeper, like more sticky. They seem to have more meaning, or and I've had people say to me, but my mother's in the hospital. You can't say that's thinking. I'm like, well, how do you know she's in the hospital? You had a thought about it. You're thinking about going to visit it. Like nothing can get inside our heads except our thinking. So one of the things I've kind of, another analogy is, I think I said it before, about being the blue sky, right? So when we've got a lot of stuff going on, like maybe we've had some tragedy or some trauma, we've got a lot, a big presentation to do at work, or the teenage kids are driving you crazy, or whatever it is, those are like clouds coming through the sky. And sometimes it can be pretty gray, right? And sometimes there can be storms, and sometimes even tornadoes, right? But the blue sky is always there, right? It's not like you have to order blue sky from Amazon after the storm leaves, right? It's, we are the blue sky. So what I always tell people is, I bet there has been a moment, even if it's a moment in the last day, week, months, whatever, you've been listing this time that you've been suffering, there would have been a moment when you felt a little bit better, even if it was just a little bit, right? You might have laughed at something on TV, or your friends came over with a pizza, whatever it is, you forgot about it for a few minutes. That feeling is who you really are, right? When we relax and let go, that's who we really are. That feeling of being up on the roof, of having a better perspective. When we hold things more lightly, when our sense of humor comes back, that's who people really are. And so when people are suffering, it's just gotten covered up by the old ideas, the stinky thinking, the belief systems, the messages we get from, whether it's a boss, a family member, a social media, whatever. It's like it's an illusion. It's going back to that thing about special effects. It's like thought is a really clever illusion, right? So analogy that just popped into my head is, think of a magician, like if you were taking your little kids to see a magician, and traditional magician, he pulls a rabbit out of a top hat, the kids are going to go, wow, that is so cool, right? Mom, when we get home, can we do that? And you're like, nah. Right? Because as an adult, it's a trick, right? Like when I'm in a good mood, I know my thinking's a trick, so I don't fall for it, right? But the kids don't understand, so they think that now we know, there's probably a hole in the hat, maybe there's a cage under the table, that's how he did it, I don't know, right? So we don't fall for the trick or for the con man, when it's obviously a con, you don't fall for it. But So take that one a bit further. Think about going back 100 years when the magician used to, saw the woman in half. Remember that? They used to do that trick, right? Have you ever thought, how do they do that? Because how come there's no blood, right? Now, if you've paid for your ticket, you're sitting in the theater in your nice red velvet seat, and the guy comes out in his top hat and there's a girl in a sparkly outfit. She gets in the box and he starts, how come nobody is rushing the stage? Like, how come nobody's calling the police? Like what, nobody's screaming. If a man went near a woman with a massive, big, sharp knife in any other circumstance, any other context, we'd be calling the police, screaming, trying to get him, But we don't. We sit there and we watch. Now, we don't know how he does it. I actually Googled it. I looked it up. There's two women. Sorry, spoiler alert. There's already one woman in the, she's very short in one box. And then it looks like the other woman gets in the box. So that when she's moving her head and she's wiggling her feet, it's actually two different women. Otherwise, it would be murder, right? One magician ever did this and he was arrested and it was never done again, right? So sitting in our seats, we know it's a trick. We might not know how he did it, but we know it's a trick. And that's what I've held on to. Even if my thinking, you've tried all these modalities, you've been to several different therapists, you've done IFS, NLP, DBT, CBT, NLP, EFT, BBC, ITV, it's like on and on and on, right? And you're still miserable. What if you just didn't listen to your thinking? What if you saw that there was actually nothing wrong with you and it was a trick? You've been innocently falling for the trick. And when you see it's just a trick, you come out of it, right? And you don't need to understand it was something from 3rd grade and something my mother said. And you're like, I don't have to analyze it. I just know I got caught up in my thinking. There's nothing to fix and I can sit and relax. And as we relax, we get more clarity. The clouds start to separate like the Simpsons, and the blue sky comes back and you're like, oh, thank God, right? So even if you glimpse the blue sky for a little bit, just know that it's there. That's who you really are. And keep looking in that direction. That's what my teachers taught me. Look for a good feeling, listen for a good feeling. And then you can come back and then keep like doing more of that. And that's how then you get to live in the blue sky most of the time. And if there are a couple of clouds, they're gonna move through. They're gonna pass.
There's another wonderful lesson nugget that you shared in there, and that's the fact that we don't have to understand why. And lots of the health and well-being, lots of the trauma recovery often looks at, you need to understand your trauma triggers. You need to understand, what you've been through so you can work through it and you can overcome it. And I love that, again, part of it could be true, not saying that always is the case, but for me, the message from what you just said was, and I'm the person who wants to and needs to understand, very rational, very pragmatic, very head driven, to be like, I need to understand why the connection is there and what's happening in my body and what the chemicals are doing and what was the trigger. But again, working with the permission that we've been given here to understand that I don't need to know why, to know that it's okay, to know that, it happens somehow. It happened, something, somewhere. It's a magic trick. I don't need to understand the magic trick to acknowledge that it's a magic trick and see it as that. I'm like, oh, cool, magic trick. Okay, I can sit back and relax. So thank you for that. It was just another wonderful little aha moment for me. It was like, this is a strong message.
Yeah, and because what I usually say to anybody who's in a pain flare-up or in a panic attack or having an anxiety moment, trying to work it out is going to make it worse. Because, I learned a lot about the fight or flight response when I was training to be a trauma counselor. And, it's just going to put more adrenaline and more cortisol into the system. If you're having an anxiety attack, panic, a pain flare-up, my advice is be as nice to yourself as possible, right? That's the time to be, and if you're at work and you might need to like take 5 minutes and walk around the block, go outside and have a cookie or like an orange or something, and just be in, like, get yourself back to the moment. And it might just take a few minutes. If you need to go home, you need to take a nap, whatever it is, you will be able to trust your wisdom to guide you how to take care of yourself in that moment. Now, later on, it's happened to me sometimes. I find that when I kind of then bounce back up to a better perspective, like Oh, yeah, that's why. I ignored that, or I was watching too much news and I scared myself, or maybe I was, I had some hurt feelings and I didn't acknowledge it. These things can happen. Oh, and so sometimes I might never know. And other times it kind of becomes obvious when you calm down. And so I just, learned, like we've been saying, not to judge myself, A, for getting into it, B, that it happened, or I have to do something to like, help myself. It's like I think we're so hard on ourselves so much of the time. And when I can step back and just see it was just I just got caught up in my thinking. That's all. And then nothing out here actually has to change. It's actually like just the perspective changes, and then that can change everything.
That is amazing and so beautiful. Hop on to our Patreon account to get this episode's amazing and wonderful gold nugget. For our listeners who've been listening to this and they're thinking, oh, wow, I need a bit more of this, or I want to find out more about something or connect with, how can or where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a website. I have two actually. The main one is my name, chanastudley.com, and Hannah's spelt with a CH. And on that website, there's you can get in touch with me through that website. I've just launched my first online program. I'm very excited about this. I had this idea 6 years ago, and I got bogged down in the technology and the presentation and what to say. And I've written 4 books, and one of them is just to go back to the books, 3 of them are novels. I found that stories are a really great way to help people. So, because do we really want to read another textbook or another anecdotal book? So the pain one, for example, the character had a lot of, it's not a biography, but she had a lot of the physical, problems that I had. And she starts to share these ideas. So the characters in the books are, doing the suffering, the falling down, the searching, the getting up, and the happy. They all have happy endings, right? So I've done a few book clubs on these books. So the pain one, at the beginning of this year, I did a course on my painless book, on that novel, with all this research in there, science behind it, like what I call our innate well-being system that we had when we realize and awareness and all that stuff works. And I recorded it and turned it into a course. It's got animations and graphics on it, and it's now on my website, and you can do it at your own pace. It's 6 hours, which sounds intense, but you can stop and start any point, go at your own pace, and it's just $97, which for 6 hours I think is a bargain because it's like 10 years of my experience and my research and working with clients all over the world. So if people want more than that, I do work one-on-one with clients, and you can say contact me through the website. You can also find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group, or just put my name into Facebook. And I also have a membership group, and it's just $25 a month, and I do 3 live coaching sessions every week. I do coaching demos, we do Q&As, I have guest speakers, book club, and people can bring their own questions and concerns, and it's a really nice supportive group. And so and I kept it at a cheap price so that people could like drop in and come, because not everybody can go to all 3 sessions every week, so people can come and go and find out what's going on and get support and help and be part of a community. So that's also on my website. So yeah, that's and the books are all on Amazon. So the first book was about trauma. The second book is about pain. It's called Painless. And the third one is about hormones. It's a hormone adventure novel. It's called Very Well, because I was going through menopause when all this started, I started understanding this. So in that one, there's a woman with 2 daughters, and between the 3 women, it kind of covers all the kind of hormonal adventures that women go through, postpartum depression and PMDD and menopause. And then the 4th book I wrote is actually a textbook. I collected over 60 stories of people from all over the world who have recovered from mental health diagnosis, just to show, just to prove this point that nobody is broken. And I'm talking things like psychosis and schizophrenia, bulimia, OCD, PTSD, you name it, childhood disorders, and ADHD, autism. I've got stories of people who've recovered. And when I say recovered, meaning they've gotten well, they're off medication, they're living their best lives. And all by understanding that they weren't broken and understanding how the mind works. It's incredible how powerful that is. And I've just finished the first draft of my next book, which is going to be about the overdiagnosis of ADHD. I'm going to do one on addictions and then maybe another one on trauma. So I've got all these. It's amazing when I stopped trying to fix myself, the creativity just like started coming. It's incredible. So I love sharing that with people and say, like, whether it's one-on-one or in a group, that's my passion and my pleasure and honor, I think.
Well, it's been our honor to have this time with you and to be able to, soak up your wisdom and really hear your stories and get your energy. Thank you so much for everything. We will make sure that all the links that you mentioned are in the description below so people can click and find out. I am excited to explore your books because Hormonal Adventures sounds like a wonderful storybook to read. But thank you so much, Hannah, for being here today and sharing so openly and giving us so many wonderful gold nuggets and a permission and acknowledgement that we're not broken.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much. My face is hurting from enjoying myself so much with you.
Exactly. That's what I always say after a good podcast. You know that you had a wonderful time. And yet, again, we talked about some difficult, heavy topics. And yet, I can feel my cheeks just being sore from all the smiling and from all the laughs because your energy is just so wonderful. So, thank you so much for being here. And to our listeners, thank you so much for spending the time here with us and listening. And we would love to hear from you as well. What have you gotten from today's episode? What was your aha moment? You've heard that I've had wonderful moments a few times as I was listening. So if you have anything you want to share with us, please let us know in the comments. We always love hearing back from you. But until next time, see you soon. Bye.
Here is your reminder about our Patreon, where you get all our really beautiful gold nuggets. And today we had a fantastic gold nugget to share. Subscribe to Patreon. The link is in the description below. Hop into the gold nugget section to access all our wonderful gold nuggets. There is also a free section where you can access snippets from past episodes, as well as some great content with tips, advice, and beautiful and wonderful wisdom. Come and join up and be part of the Into Your Life community. We would love to see you there.